The air in the Forrester mansion was thick with tension, a palpable weight that pressed against the silk and velvet of the assembled guests. It was supposed to be the happiest day of Drew Kane and Willow Tate's lives. Is a union meant to solidify their bond and perhaps more strategically present a united front against the legal storms gathering on the horizon? But as the string quartet played a soft melancholic rendition of a classic love song, the atmosphere felt less like a celebration and more like a ceasefire about to break. Drew stood at the altar, his jaw set in a line of determined optimism, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of anxiety as they darted toward the back of the room. Willow, radiant yet pale in her lace gown, walked down the aisle with a hesitation that only those closest to her could decipher. To the casual observer, it was bridal nerves too. Michael Corinthos standing stiffly near the front row. It was a silent scream. His gaze bored into Drew, a mixture of betrayal and simmering rage that threatened to boil over with the slightest provocation. "Dearly beloved," the officiant began, his voice booming slightly too loud in the hushed room. "We are gathered here today." Laura Spencer, seated near the aisle, smoothed the fabric of her dress, her fingers trembling ever so slightly. She exchanged a brief unreadable glance with Sonny Corinthos, who sat across the aisle, his face a mask of stone. They were not sitting together, yet an invisible thread of shared burden seemed to pull taut between them. The ceremony proceeded, the vows exchanged in hushed tones that barely carried over the murmurs of the guests. It was during the exchange of rings that the fragile peace shattered. A server navigating the periphery of the seating arrangement with a heavy tray of crystal flutes caught his foot on a loose runner of the carpet. The stumble was clumsy, almost comical in slow motion until he collided with a massive ornate floral arrangement standing like a sentinel near the altar. The crash was deafening. Glass shattered, water splashed across the polished floor, and the towering structure of leaves and hydrangeas toppled over with a sickening thud. Gasps erupted from the pews. Drew instinctively pulled Willow back, shielding her from the debris. "Is everyone all right?" Dante Falconer called out, rising from his seat, his detective instincts kicking in before the echo of the crash had faded. But as the server scrambled to apologize, frantically pulling away the broken trellis and mounds of wet greenery, the room fell into a silence far deeper and colder than before, buried beneath the wreckage of the floral display curled in a grotesque mockery of sleep. Was a human hand. A scream pierced the air, likely from one of the Quartermain staff, as the server recoiled, revealing the rest of the grim discovery. It was not just a hand. It was the lifeless graying body of Professor Henry Hank Dalton. Panic rippled through the crowd like a shockwave. Willow buried her face in Drew's chest, sobbing while Michael stepped forward, placing himself protectively between the chaos and his family. But it was the reaction of two specific guests that carried the most weight. Unseen by the masses, but screaming in the silence of their own minds. Laura's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp that was less about the horror of death and more about the horror of recognition. Her eyes locked with Sonny's. The mob boss hadn't moved a muscle, but the color had drained from his face, leaving him looking older, wearier. "It's him," Laura thought, the room spinning. "It's Dalton." "But how?" We took care of this." Sonny's eyes narrowed. An imperceptible shake of his head, warning her to remain still. The body they had supposedly disposed of, the dark secret that had forged an unlikely and desperate alliance between the mayor and the mob boss, was now lying center stage at the social event of the season. "Nobody move." Dandy's voice was a whip crack of authority. He was already moving toward the body, pulling his badge. "Chase, secure the exits. This is now a crime scene." Harrison Chase nodded grimly, moving to block the double doors. I need everyone to stay where they are. Please remain calm. The transition from wedding to investigation was jarring. The festive lights now felt like interrogation lamps. Dante knelt beside Dalton's body, checking for a pulse that he knew wasn't there. He looked up, his expression dark. He's been dead for a while. Rigor is set. Who is that? Drew asked, his voice tight. How the hell did a body get into the floral arrangements? It's Professor Dalton, Dante said, standing up and scanning the room. The man everyone's been looking for. Whispers broke out. Accusations flew in hushed tones. The suspicion in the room was a tangible thing, seeking a target. Eyes turned toward the back where young Rocco Falconer stood, looking terrified. The boy had been publicly feuding with Dalton weeks prior, a fact the press had eaten up. Rocco, Dante said softly, his eyes landing on his son. Did you see anything near the altar earlier? No. Dad, I swear. Rocco's voice cracked. I didn't do this. I hated him. Yeah, but I didn't kill him. Nobody is accusing you yet. Son, Dante said, though the tightness in his jaw suggested he knew how bad this looked. But we need to ask everyone questions. Chase, start with the staff. I want to know who set up these flowers. Amidst the swirling chaos, Laura found a moment to step away from the crowd, fainting a need for air. She moved toward a secluded alcove near the terrace doors. Seconds later, Sonny appeared, his movement silent and predatory. Laura, he said, his voice a low rumble. Sonny, this is impossible. She hissed, her composure fracturing. We the quarry. We left him at the quarry. I saw the water take him. Someone moved him, Sonny said, his eyes scanning the room, checking for eavesdroppers. Someone knows, Laura. This wasn't an accident. You don't just accidentally stuff a corpse into a wedding decoration. This is a message to us. Laura asked, her breath hitching. Or to frame someone else. If they find any trace of us on him, they won't. Sonny cut her off, though his confidence seemed forced. We were careful, but we need to stick to the narrative. We haven't seen Dalton in weeks. We don't know anything. Dante is leading the investigation, Sonny. Laura whispered, tears pricking her eyes. He's good. If he finds out I lied to him, that I'm involved in a cover-up. He won't. Sonny commanded, gripping her arm gently but firmly. Pull it together, Mayor, for everyone's sake. Across the room, Britt Westman stood frozen near the champagne tower, her knuckles white as she gripped her clutch. She wasn't looking at the body. She was looking at the faces of the people reacting to it. She had seen things, terrible things in her time, but the memory of Dalton's final moments was a specter she couldn't shake. She remembered the sound of the gunshot. She remembered Jen Sidwell's cold laughter. She knew that Dalton hadn't just died, he had been executed. And she knew that Laura and Sonny had stumbled into the aftermath, cleaning up a mess they didn't create to protect people they loved. If I speak, Britt thought, her heart hammering against her ribs. Sidwell kills me. If I stay silent, innocent people might go down for this. She felt a gaze burning into her and turned. Across the room, leaning casually against a pillar as if he were merely observing a boring play, was Sidwell himself. He raised a glass of sparkling water and a mock toast, a small, cruel smile playing on his lips. He was enjoying this. Sidwell had orchestrated this, Britt realized with a jolt of nausea. He hadn't just killed Dalton. He had preserved him, moved him, and planted him here to blow up the lives of everyone who dared oppose him. It was a masterstroke of psychological warfare. Quite the turn of events, isn't it, Dr. Westman? Britt jumped. Sidwell had crossed the room with unnatural speed. He stood beside her now, his voice a silky whisper. You did this. Britt hissed, keeping her voice low. I merely return lost property, Sidwell replied, his eyes dancing with malice. I thought it would be a nice wedding gift. Something borrowed, something blue, something dead. Laura and Sonny, they didn't kill him, Britt said. Does it matter? Sidwell mused. They hid the body. In the eyes of the law, that makes them accessories. And when your friend Dante finds the forensic evidence I may have left behind, well, the great mayor and the untouchable godfather will be trading their designer clothes for prison jumpsuits. You're a monster, Britt spat. I'm a businessman, Britt, and business is looking up. He leaned in closer. Remember your place. One word. From you. And the next body they find in a flower arrangement will be wearing that lovely dress you have on. He walked away, leaving Britt trembling. Back at the altar, the investigation was intensifying. Chase was bagging evidence. A shard of glass. A piece of fabric caught on the stand. Dante. Chase called out. Look at this. Dante moved over, peering at the neck of the deceased. There were marks, not just from the strangulation or the gunshot wound that was partially obscured by the collar, but something else. Residue. Is that clay? Dante asked. Looks like quarry silt. Chase noted. And look at the bruising. It's post-mortem. Someone moved him roughly. Dante stood up, his eyes sweeping the room, landing on his father, then on Laura. He felt a knot form in his stomach, a detective's intuition that he desperately wanted to ignore. This body was moved. Dante announced to the room, his voice echoing. Professor Dalton was killed elsewhere and brought here. This was a deliberate act to stage a scene. Michael stepped forward. So, who had access? Who set up the hall? We're checking the logs, Chase said. But the security cameras were looped. Whoever did this near the layout, or they own the layout, a voice sneered from the back. It was Tracy Quartermain, looking imperious despite the circumstances. This is Quartermain property, but let's not forget who has a history of making people disappear. Her eyes flicked towards Sonny. That's enough. Drew snapped. Sonny is a guest. We are all victims of this sick prank. Prank. Laura's voice was shrill. This is a man's life, Drew. A man who is terrorizing this family. Michael countered coldly. Maybe someone thought they were doing us a favor. The accusation hung heavy in the air. Laura felt the walls closing in. She needed to get out, to think, to plan, but the police tape was already up. Suddenly, a uniformed officer jogged in from the garden holding a tablet. Detective Falconer, we found something in the bushes outside the service entrance. A burner phone. Dante took the tablet, which displayed the last sent message from the device. He read it and his blood ran cold. Package delivered. The mayor and the mob boss will appreciate the reminder. Dante looked up, his face a mask of confusion and betrayal. He walked slowly toward Laura and Sonny. Mom, Dante said, his voice trembling. Dad, what does this mean? Laura went pale. Sonny stepped in front of her. It means someone is trying to frame us. Dante, Sonny said smoothly, though his eyes were hard as flint. It's a setup. Is it? Dante asked, holding up the tablet. Because the timestamp on this text is from hours ago, but the GPS data on the phone, it tracks back to a location I know you visited last night, Dad. The old warehouse district. Sonny remained silent, his mind racing. He had been there meeting with a contact to discuss Sidwell, but he hadn't had the body. And Mom, Dante turned to Laura. Why is your fingerprint on the screen? Laura gasped. I never touched that phone. It's a partial, the officer corrected. But it's a match to the mayor's prints on file. Sidwell. Laura whispered almost inaudibly. She realized now the depth of the trap. He must have lifted her prints, planted the phone. Dante, listen to me, Laura pleaded, stepping forward. We are being played. You have to believe me. I want to believe you, Dante said, his voice breaking. But I have a dead body, a planted phone, and a parents who look like they've seen a ghost. I can't just look the other way. Then don't, Sonny challenged. Do your job, but dig deeper, because if you arrest us, the real killer walks free. Sidwell watched from the shadows, swirling the ice in his glass. The chaos was exquisite. The wedding was ruined. The families were turning on each other, and the two pillars of Port Charles were about to crumble under the weight of a crime they tried to hide but didn't commit. Britt watched him, her hand drifting to her pocket where her own phone lay. She had a recording, a snippet of audio from the night Dalton died. It wasn't much, just Sidwell's voice giving me order, but it was enough to clear Laura and Sonny, but it was also enough to sign her own death warrant. She looked at Willow, sobbing in Drew's arms. She looked at Laura, terrified and cornered. She looked at Dante, a son torn between duty and love. Rit took a breath, her fingers tightening around the phone. The truth was a dangerous thing in Port Charles. But tonight, silence might be the deadliest weapon of all. Detective. Britt's voice rang out clear and sharp, cutting through the murmurs. Every head turned. Sidwell's glass stopped halfway to his mouth. I have something to say, Britt said, stepping into the center of the room, her eyes locking with Sidwell's. I know how Dalton got here. The room held its breath. The storm had broken, and the flood was about to begin. Next, the fluorescent lights of the General Hospital break room hummed with an irritating frequency that seemed to drill directly into Nathan West's skull. He gripped the edge of the counter, his knuckles turning white as another wave of agony washed over him. It wasn't just a migraine. It was a seismic shift in his gray matter, a physical intrusion that brought with it jagged shards of imagery, a sterile white room, the cold press of metal. Against his temples, a voice, raspy and accented, whispering about legacy, and the perfect soldier. Nathan squeezed his eyes shut, trying to banish the phantom voice. When he opened them, the reflection in the dark break room window stared back a man who had been dead to the world for years. Now returned, but with a mind that felt like a puzzle with missing pieces. The face was his, but the eyes held a flicker of something foreign, something programmed. He shook his head, the motion triggering a flash of a man in a WSB holding Cell Caesar. Faison, but Faison was dead. Why did the old monster's laughter echo so clearly in the silence of the hospital? Down on the docks, the fog rolled in off the harbor, obscuring the grim industrial skyline of Port Charles. Britt Westman pulled her coat tighter, the chill seeping into her bones, though it was the man blocking her path that made her shiver. Jason Morgan stood like a statue in the mist, his leather jacket creaking slightly as he crossed his arms. His eyes were devoid of warmth, fixed on her with predatory intensity. You're not leading until I get answers, Britt, Jason said, his voice low and level. Sidwell. Dalton. I know you were in the warehouse when Dalton died. I saw the security footage. Britt took a step back, her heel catching on the damp pavement. I told you, Jason, I was coerced. Sidwell is a monster. He's a mercenary. Jason cut in, stepping closer. But he doesn't work alone. Dalton was a geneticist specializing in memory mapping. Why was he meeting with you? And why is Sidwell suddenly interested in your brother? Nathan has nothing to do with this. Britt snapped, though her voice wavered. The lie tasted like ash. She knew exactly why Sidwell was interested. She had seen the files. She had seen the funding transfers from the shell corporations that all led back to the same terrifying crest, the Faison family seal. If you don't tell me the truth, Jason warned, his hand resting near his hip. I can't protect you when Sidwell decides you're a loose end. And looking at the way Dalton ended up, that time is coming fast. Later that night, the headache dropped Nathan to his knees in his apartment. He clawed at the carpet, gasping for air as the mental dam finally broke. The fragmented images coalesced into a terrifyingly high-definition memory. He wasn't just a detective. He wasn't just a husband or a father. In the gaps of his existence, in the death he had supposedly suffered, he had been a project. Flashback. A laboratory in Switzerland. Nathan is strapped to a chair, his chest heaving. Faison stands over him. Not the frail old man who died in Port Charles, but a younger vital version, or perhaps a recording playing on a loop on the monitors. You are not merely my son, Nathan. The voice boomed. You are the fail-safe. When the traitor's Britt inevitably seeks to destroy my legacy, you will be the instrument of her correction. Nathan gasped, pulling himself up onto the sofa. Sweat drenched his shirt. He remembered it now. He had been a pawn. A sleeper agent kept in stasis. His neural pathways rewritten to serve a singular purpose. The return to Port Charles wasn't a miracle. It was a deployment. The realization hit Nathan with the force of a physical blow. He paced the small living room, his hands trembling. The programming was specific. It wasn't just about killing or spying. It was about control. Faison knew Britt was the weak link, the one with a conscience. He had anticipated her rebellion against Sidwell. Nathan looked at his own hands that had held his son James just yesterday. Now they felt like weapons. He realized with sick horror that his impulses to protect Britt, to be near her since his return, were not born of brotherly love, but of a subsonic directive embedded in his cortex. He was her handler. He was her jailer. No, he whispered, grabbing a glass vase from the table and hurling it against the wall. It shattered, the sound sharp and final. I won't do it. But even as he defied the voice, he felt the compulsion tightening its grip, a cold wire pulling at his motor functions. The next morning, Britt entered Nathan's apartment using her spare key, carrying a bag of pastries, a peace offering she hoped would distract him from her confrontation with Jason. She stopped dead in the hallway. The apartment was a wreck. Shattered glass littered the floor. Nathan sat in the center of the chaos, staring at a blank television screen. When he turned to look at her, Britt dropped the bag. His eyes were dilated, his expression devoid of the warmth she relied on. He moved with a mechanical fluidity that was terrifyingly familiar. Nathan, she whispered. Sit down, Britt, he said. The voice was his, but the cadence was wrong. It was too precise, too cold. Britt's heart hammered against her ribs. She scanned his face looking for her brother but found only a stranger wearing his skin. What's happening to you? Is this the headaches? The integration is complete, Nathan said, tilting his head. I see the pattern now. You've been meeting with Jason Morgan. You're considering betraying the trust. The trust? Britt stepped back toward the door. Nathan? You're scaring me. Faison is dead. Whatever he did to you. Faison is the architect, Nathan interrupted, standing up. I am the structure and you are the resident who is trying to burn the house down. Britt realized then with a sinking dread that the brother she had mourned and celebrated was currently a prisoner in his own body. He was being manipulated and by extension he was being used to manipulate her. The phone in Nathan's pocket buzzed. He answered it without breaking eye contact with Britt. Yes, Nathan said. A pause. Understood. The target is the Metro Court, the water supply. He hung up and looked at Britt. The instructions have been updated. You have access to the hospital's infectious disease storage. You will retrieve the canister of the modified pathogen Sidwell provided. You will bring it to the Metro Court's main water tank. No. Britt breathed, horror dawning on her. That would kill hundreds. Nathan, listen to me. That's our friends. That's Maxie. That's your son. Nathan's face twitched. For a second, the mask slipped. A look of sheer agony contorted his features. Britt, run. He rasped. The voice strained, but then his posture snapped back to rigid attention. You will comply. Or the secondary protocol initiates the elimination of immediate emotional compromises. Starting with Jason Morgan, Britt drove toward the hospital, her hands shaking so hard she could barely grip the steering wheel. The threat was clear. If she didn't poison the water supply, Nathan or the thing controlling him would kill Jason and likely Maxie and James next. She pulled into the parking structure, but didn't go to the entrance. Instead, she dialed a number she had sworn never to use again. Morgan, the voice answered on the first ring. Jason, it's me, Britt. Choked out, tears streaming down her face. Don't hang up. You were right. About everything. Sidwell Faison, it's Nathan. They've done something to his head. He's the weapon, Jason. And he's got a gun to my head, metaphorically speaking. Where are you? Jason's voice shifted instantly from suspicion to tactical command. I'm at GH. I'm supposed to steal a pathogen. If I don't, he says he'll kill you, but I can't do it. Jason, I can't hurt people. I need you to stop him. Even if you have to hurt him. Stay put. Jason ordered. I'm minutes out. We're not hurting him. We're going to break the programming. An hour later, the industrial basement of the hospital was silent, save for the drip of a leaking pipe. Britt stood by the secure storage locker, the canister of the pathogen in her hand, a decoy Jason had hastily rigged from a saline solution. Nathan emerged from the shadows. He held a suppressed pistol at his side. Complete the task, Nathan commanded. I have it, Britt said, her voice trembling. But Nathan, please look at me. I'm your sister. We used to hide from Faison. Together. We survived him. Don't let him win now. Nathan raised the gun. The task. Britt. Suddenly, the air pressure in the room changed. Jason Morgan dropped from the ventilation duct above, landing silently behind Nathan. In one fluid motion, he kicked the gun from Nathan's hand and locked him in a choke hold. Britt the sedative. Jason yelled. Nathan roared. A sound of pure animalistic rage and threw Jason off with strength. That shouldn't have been humanly possible. He spun, eyes wild, and engaged Jason in a brutal hand-to-hand exchange. Punches that would have floored a normal man barely registered on Nathan. Rit scrambled for her medical bag, her fingers fumbling with the syringe. Nathan, stop. Jason took a heavy blow to the ribs, but used the momentum to sweep Nathan's legs. As Nathan hit the concrete, Jason pinned his arms. Now, Britt, she lunged forward, jamming the needle into Nathan's neck. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. She sobbed as she depressed the plunger. Nathan's struggle ceased almost instantly. His eyes rolled back and he slumped against the cold floor. When Nathan woke, he was strapped to a gurney. In a safe house provided by Sonny Corinthos. The room was dim. Jason stood by the door, gun holstered but ready. Britt sat by the bedside holding Nathan's hand. My head. Nathan groaned. The mechanical rigidity was gone, replaced by raw human exhaustion. The sedative knocked out the neurotransmitter blockers they were using. Britt explained softly. Jason had a contact at the WSB analyze your blood work. You were being dosed with a synthetic compound that made you susceptible to hypnotic suggestion. Nathan looked at Jason, then at Britt. I remember the order. The water tank. God, Britt, I almost. But you didn't, Jason said, stepping forward. Because you fought it long enough for Britt to call me. But we're not done. The signal that activated you, it came from a source. Nathan closed his eyes, concentrating through the lingering pain. It wasn't a phone call. It was a frequency, a broadcast. I can trace it. I know the frequency now. It's etched in my brain. Then we track it, Britt said, her jaw setting. We find who's holding the remote. The three of them moved through the night like ghosts. Nathan, shaky but determined, led them to an abandoned radio tower on the outskirts of Port Charles. The signal grew stronger in his mind. A physical pull. It's here, Nathan whispered, pointing to the control shack at the base of the tower. Jason kicked the door in. Inside, surrounded by banks of servers and transmitters, sat a figure in a high-backed chair. The chair swiveled. It wasn't Faison. It was Jen Sidwell holding a tablet that displayed Nathan's vitals. Impressive, Sidwell sneered. The prototype rejected the programming. Faison always said the Westman blood was too stubborn for its own good. It's over, Sidwell, Britt said, leveling her own weapon, a small pistol Jason had given her. Turn it off. Off. Sidwell laughed. This isn't a light switch. Dr. Westman, this is a network. Nathan was just a receiver. The transmitter is linked to the WLSB's own satellite grid. If my heart stops, a signal goes out that activates every sleeper agent Faison planted in the last years. Nathan is just one of many. Nathan stepped forward, the pain in his head blinding, but his clarity absolute. You're bluffing. Faison wanted a legacy, not an apocalypse. He wanted to rule, not destroy. Faison is dead. Sidwell shouted, losing his composure. I am the one who perfected his work. I am the one who brought you back from the void. And I'm the one sending you to yours, Jason said. But before Jason could fire, Nathan grabbed his arm. Wait, the tablet. If he dies, the dead man switched triggers. We need the code. Sidwell grinned. And you'll never get it. He tapped the screen. A high-pitched whine filled the room. Nathan screamed, clutching his head, falling to his knees. He's overloading his neural pathway. Britt screamed, Jason, destroy the servers. Jason didn't hesitate. He opened fire on the server racks, sparks showering the room. The whining noise pitch shifted, distorting until the equipment exploded in a ball of fire and ozone. Sidwell lunged for the exit, but Britt was faster. She swung the butt of her pistol, connecting with his temple. He went down hard. The noise in Nathan's head stopped abruptly. He gasped, lying on the floor, staring up at the smoke-filled ceiling. Minutes later, they stood outside the burning shack. Sirens wailed in the distance. The PCPD was closing in. Is it over? Britt asked, supporting Nathan's weight. Nathan looked at the burning tower, then at the tablet Jason had managed to salvage from Sidwell's unconscious grip. The screen was cracked, but the data was scrolling. The local signal is dead, Nathan said, his voice grim, but the network, it's still active. Sidwell wasn't lying. There are others and someone else just logged into the system remotely. Who? Jason asked. Nathan looked up, his eyes dark with a new terrifying understanding. The login credentials. They belong to Peter August. Britt gasped. Peter is dead. So was I, Nathan said quietly. And so were you, Britt. The sirens grew louder. The three of them stood in the flickering light of the fire, the victory hollowed out by the revelation. They had cut one string, but the puppeteer was still out there hiding in the shadows of the grave. We have to go, Jason said, moving toward the car. Now, Britt helped Nathan into the back seat, looking back one last time at the inferno. The nightmare wasn't over. It had just evolved. Music,